The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
What a weekend. A situation has really blown up involving a DNC speaker who was the father of Humayun Khan, a U.S. Army captain who was killed in 2004 in the Iraq War. First, the sort of controversy was, hey, Fox News ignored the speech by Khizr Khan, instead opting to air commercials during the speech, and then later returning to the DNC in time to broadcast a song by pop singer Katy Perry, which was right after Mr. Khan's speech. That was controversy number one. As a result of the attention that got, a bunch of people started saying, hey, wait a second, Khizr Khan was hugely critical of Donald Trump during his speech. What does Trump think of this? First, let me just play for you the critical part from Mr. Khan's speech.
The best of America. If it was up to Donald Trump, he never would have been in America. Donald Trump consistently smears the character of Muslims. He disrespects other minorities, women, judges, even his own party leadership. He vows to build walls and ban us from this country. Donald Trump, you're asking Americans to trust you with their future. Let me ask you, have you even read the United States Constitution? I will gladly lend you my copy. In this document, look for the words liberty and equal protection of law. Have you ever been to Arlington Cemetery? Go look at the graves of brave patriots who died defending United States of America. You will see all faiths, genders, and ethnicities. You have sacrificed nothing and no one.
This was a very, very good speech, although I think my analysis is going to leave both lovers and haters of Trump upset to some degree, and I'm okay with that. So first of all, Khan was spot on in terms of what he said about Donald Trump, and Trump's reaction has been absolutely disgusting. We knew Trump's character was a really, really ugly thing. I mean, he did mock a reporter with a disability in a very, very crude fashion. We know it's totally gross. Trump went on ABC this morning, not this morning, but the program called This Morning, and he said the following.
There was a man named Khizr Khan speaking at the Democratic Convention. His son, Captain Humayun Khan, was killed serving in Iraq, and he had some very tough questions for you. He said you wouldn't have even let his son in America.
He doesn't know that. I saw him. He was, very emotional and probably looked like a nice guy to me. His wife, if you look at his wife, she was standing there. She had nothing to say. Maybe she wasn't allowed to have anything to say. You tell me, but plenty of people have written that.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of below the belt. I'm as critical as anybody about the anti-woman realities in Muslim countries. Believe me, I get called an Islamophobe for pointing out just completely undeniable, uncontroversial realities. But how is that a response? It's not really responding to the content of it, which Trump kind of does a little bit later. And here is where it really goes totally off the rails. Here is Donald Trump saying, actually, Khizr Khan is wrong. He did make sacrifices.
Things going on, and it's not good.
He said you have sacrificed nothing and no one.
Well, that sounds, who wrote that? Did Hillary's scriptwriters write it?
How would you answer that, Father? What sacrifice have you made for your country?
I think I made a lot of sacrifices. I worked very, very hard. I've created thousands and thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs. I think
Those are
I've done a lot.
sacrifices?
Oh, sure, I think they're sacrifices. I think when I can employ thousands and thousands of people, take care of their education, take care of so many things, even in military. I mean, I was very responsible, along with a group of people, for getting the Vietnam Memorial built in downtown Manhattan, which to this
Creating jobs is a sacrifice. Helping to build a Vietnam War memorial by making some phone calls is a sacrifice. I don't know that Trump knows the definition of sacrifice, although I read once that Trump had to stay at a hotel with a really bad minibar and no on-demand movies whatsoever, and he barely got through it. I mean, really. Now, let's say for a second we grant that building a Vietnam War memorial and creating jobs are sacrifices, which they obviously are not. Khizr Khan was clearly talking about sacrifices made in defense of our country, and Donald Trump has made none of those sacrifices, as did Humayun Khan. The answer is that there are no such sacrifices that Donald Trump made. And we know that Trump doesn't respect members of the military. He talks about the military as an entity. He's pro-military, blah, blah, blah. But look at the instances of disrespecting individual members of the military. We have, of course, here Humayun Khan, but we also have his insult of John McCain, saying, oh, John McCain is not a hero because he was captured by the enemy. Enemies don't, or heroes don't get captured by the enemy. And of course, that's absolutely ridiculous. Now, a lot of Republicans are not siding with Donald Trump here. Senator John McCain, of course, made a statement blasting Donald Trump's comments about this and saying this is absolutely absurd. He is completely belittling Humayun Khan's sacrifice, etc. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican from South Carolina, also saying this is going to a place where we've never gone before to push back against the families of the fallen. Jeb Bush saying this is incredibly disrespectful. John Kasich saying the only way anyone should be talking about Gold Star parents, meaning parents whose children have been killed in the line of duty, is with honor and respect. However, and I think this is where I will anger some other people in the audience, not everything that Khizr Khan said during his post-speech media tour made sense. Now, Trump, disgusting, absolutely disgusting here. However, listen to what Mr. Khan said on CNN about the connection between Islam and Islamic terror.
It is our duty to keep this country, our country, beautiful country, safe. We have always thought of that way. We will continue to do our part to keep it safe and beautiful. What he cites in the name of Islam and all that, that is not Islam at all. I wish somebody would have put something in his head that these are terrorists, these are criminals, these folks have nothing to do with Islam.
This is not a logical argument, okay? And I want to talk this through. Now, we have to be able to be adults here and recognize that I am both a critic of how Donald Trump responded to this man who gave a great speech, but also a critic of this last statement. It is not logical to say that Islam has nothing to do with self-professed Islamic terror. You can argue that when someone commits terror in the name of Islam, that it is a perversion of Islam. You can argue it's a misinterpretation of the texts, and we could sort of debate whether that's true or not, and we can explore that, right? But to say that there is no connection between people committing acts of violence self-reportedly in the name of Islam and Islam requires suspending any connection to reality. And here's the conflict, here's the double standard that I want to illuminate. You will hear from some that American foreign policy can have a direct connection, is the cause of this terrorism that we see. If your argument is that you cannot blame Islam at all for radical Islamic terror, but you can blame U.S. foreign policy, you're sort of using the same flawed logic, right? In the same way that you don't believe others that their terror is in any way related to Islam, you are imposing that everyone must believe that it has been caused by American foreign policy, as if there is any objective way to say A is a cause, B is not a cause, full stop. How does an American know that the terror carried out by Islamic terrorists around the world who say they were inspired by Islam isn't really inspired by that, but rather by the foreign policy of your country? It's incredibly presumptuous. It is both presumptuous and ridiculous, actually. The reality, as usual, is shades of gray, right? There are people, most Muslims, who would never be inspired to carry out real world violence, no matter what is in the Quran, and no matter what U.S. foreign policy is. It's unfortunate, really, when we hear that Islam has nothing to do with Islamic terror. Well, it has something to do, maybe, with what they mean is there's no certainty that all Muslims become terrorists because of Islam. Of course, who's arguing that, right? That's an undeniable reality. But this game that is played where anyone even self-professing that they were inspired by Islam was not really inspired by Islam, it's incredibly presumptuous and arrogant to tell other people that they are wrong in terms of what inspired them and to impose an alternative solution, which is, no, they were inspired by U.S. foreign policy. Well, says who? In what way can you say that that is definitively true and what they claim inspired them is not true? Really doesn't make any sense. So Trump, absolutely disgusting. The idea that Islam has nothing to do with terror committed under the name of Islam also makes absolutely no sense. Hey, twice now in a sit-down interview and on social media, Donald Trump has been caught in flat-out, outright lies over the weekend. I am starting to believe that the word Trump used about his opponent, Ben Carson, pathological, may actually apply to Donald Trump's lies. First of all, we now have the schedule for the national debates that will take place between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. There are four such debates that will take place. Donald Trump said in a sit-down interview and on social media that he doesn't like the idea of having one of the debates at the same time as Monday Night Football, believing this will divide the audience in the fall. And he actually suggested that Hillary Clinton's campaign was behind this move. Let's take a look first at a tweet that Donald Trump sent over the weekend. Trump tweeting, and I think we have it here, as usual, let's go back to that first one there. As usual, Hillary and the Dems are trying to rig the debates so two are up against major NFL games. Same as last time with Bernie, unacceptable. Now, here's where it gets Looney Tunes. Prior to the tweet, in conversation with George Stephanopoulos on ABC, Trump actually said that the NFL wrote to him stressed out over the potential competition on TV, saying, quote, "I'll tell you what I don't like. It's against two NFL games. I got a letter from the NFL saying this is ridiculous." However, the NFL says, no, we didn't send the guy a letter. The NFL absolutely denies that they contacted Donald Trump to complain about these scheduling conflicts. And they said, while we would obviously wish the debate commission would find another night, we did not send a letter to Donald Trump. This is a flat out lie. I mean, Trump said the NFL wrote to me, and the NFL says, no, we didn't write to him. And why on earth would the NFL lie about this? And then another lie over the weekend. Trump also claiming on Saturday that he turned down a meeting with billionaires Charles and David Koch, the Koch brothers, saying, quote, "I turned down a meeting with Charles and David Koch. Much better for them to meet with the puppets of politics. They will do much better." Seems like that was a flat out lie as well. Top Koch officials immediately challenged Trump's claim. Spokesman James Davis said, quote, "You'll have to ask the Trump campaign where they got their information from," saying there is nothing that they know about that suggests a meeting was offered to Trump, which he then turned down. And one of the weirdest things about Trump's lies is he often lies about things he has to know are going to be revealed as lies. Maybe he knows his supporters are too low information and gullible to actually punish him for this. You can show them, we know, indisputable evidence that Trump is lying or making stuff up on the spot or just doesn't know anything. And they'll say, oh, yeah, that's the liberal media. Well, no, Trump said A, and it turns out that the opposite of A is actually true. If people are using the claim that Hillary Clinton is a liar as a reason not to vote for her, how on earth can you justify voting for Donald Trump? I mean, to quote Trump himself, the lies are starting to seem pathological in nature. Am I wrong on something? Send me a tweet. I'm on Twitter at @ePacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Shayla Jones. Shayla, thank you so much for being a supporter of the David Pakman Show. This really is your show. It is viewer and listener supported media. The show exists and is now on 5 days a week because of the support of members who sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. We also do an entire extra show just for our members. Definitely worth taking advantage of. Remember that if you ever shop on Amazon.com, the shopping you do can support the work that we do. If first you go to davidpakman.com/Amazon, davidpakman.com/Amazon will redirect you to the Amazon website, and then anything you buy sends us a little kickback. I was looking at the list of items purchased over the weekend, and it kind of took me back to my childhood. The Karate Kid, people buying DVDs of The Karate Kid. I loved The Karate Kid when I was a kid, and I'm actually watching a documentary now called The Real Miyagi, which is about the actual karate sensei on whom Mr. Miyagi in The Karate Kid was based. I haven't finished it yet. It's pretty good, though, and I might recommend it to you at some point. Also, people buying old Nintendo controllers and games over the weekend. I used to love Nintendo. I remember my first experience with video games when I came to the U.S. was actually playing Mario, Super Mario Brothers, or maybe it was just called Super Mario or Mario Brothers. Anyway, the first one with one of those old 2-button controllers, just A and B. And game still holds up, I have to say. I actually replayed it just a few years ago, and it is a hell of a game. And a lot of people clearly participating in the renaissance of old Nintendo games over the weekend through our Amazon link, which is davidpakman.com/Amazon. 2 years ago, you might remember, this was kind of like one of the biggest stories on corporate and independent media every single day for several weeks. Russia made incursions into Ukraine, including this very controversial annexation of Crimea. Roughly 10,000 lives have been lost as a result of the ongoing violence. Now, you might expect that the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, would have, I don't know, some semblance of a working knowledge of what's going on in Ukraine. Trump was on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos over the weekend, and he was asked about this conflict. If you're expecting to see anything even resembling insightful opinion on what's going on there, forget it. It's not even clear that Donald Trump has a passing awareness of what the hell was going on over the last 2 years in that part of the world. You'll remember that the Trump campaign pushed a little bit more of a pro-Russia Republican platform 2 weeks ago. And that's sort of part of what's building this picture that Donald Trump may be more connected to Putin and the Kremlin and Russia than maybe would be advantageous for him in terms of the upcoming election. And he was asked about this. That was sort of the context. George Stephanopoulos said, hey, so, you know, your campaign, you pushed for a lighter touch when it comes to Russia in the Republican platform. It's already hilarious just with Trump's first response. Take a look.
Why did you soften the GOP platform on Ukraine?
I wasn't involved in that. Honestly, I was not involved. Yeah, I was not involved in that. I'd like to... I'd have to take a look at it, but I was not involved.
Do you know what they did?
They softened it, I heard, but I was not involved.
So let me see if I get this straight. Your campaign, which speaks for you, presumably the campaign is a representation of you, makes changes to the Republican, it asks for changes to the Republican platform, which softens the stance on Russia. And when you're asked about it, the first thing you said is, I wasn't involved in that at all. And I've only heard in passing that my campaign, which works on behalf of me, has softened. So basically you're saying you're a puppet. You're admitting that you're a puppet. You're not even aware of what it is your campaign do. You have a passing knowledge of what your campaign did. Your people are doing things that you're not involved in, nor understand, nor seemingly have an informed opinion on. Great leadership from the master at building organizations, right? I mean, this is just ridiculous. Now let's continue, and this is where it starts to get even more nutty.
They took away the part of the platform calling for provision of lethal weapons to Ukraine to defend themselves. Why is that a good idea?
Look, you know, I have my own ideas. He's not going into Ukraine, okay? Just so you understand. He's not going to go into Ukraine. All right, you can mark it down, you can put it down, you can take it anywhere you want.
Wait a second, Donald. You're guaranteeing us that Putin is not going into Ukraine. Oh, cool. Well, he's been there for 2 years, and it was one of the biggest international news stories for months. So how does Trump get out of this? Simple. Go into a word salad coma, reminiscent of Sarah Palin, and that's exactly what he did.
Put it down, you can take it anywhere
Well, he's already
you want.
there, isn't he?
Okay, well, he's there in a certain way, but I'm not there. You have Obama there. And frankly, that whole part of the world is a mess under Obama, with all the strength that you're talking about and all of the power of NATO and all of this. In the meantime, he's going away. He takes Crimea. He's sort of, I mean...
But you said you might recognize that.
I'm going to take a look at it. But, you know, the people of Crimea, from what I've heard, would rather be with Russia than where they were.
Is anybody paying attention to the fact that we have an uninformed individual, uninformed to a degree that rivals Sarah Palin, who believed Africa was a country and counted Alaska's proximity to Russia as foreign policy experience? Trump is rivaling Sarah Palin's lack of knowledge. The laughingstock of the last 8 years of the Republican Party, Sarah Palin, might know more than Donald Trump about some of these issues. And by the way, if you're trying to make it seem as though you're not in cahoots with Russia, Trump saying, hey, the Crimean people might rather be a part of Russia happens to be the same line that Russian state media uses. And by the way, that referendum that Trump and Russian media refer to has been widely discredited as taking place during a heavily armed occupation by Russian troops. There is nothing at all about that was honest, fair, or legal. And Western leaders have denounced the entire referendum vote as illegal. It's sort of funny and horrifying that I'm able to group together the opinion of Trump and Russian state media. That's what we have right now. This is the situation. And the most disturbing thing, I'm not disturbed particularly that you have people as clueless as Donald Trump. I'm not disturbed or surprised that people as clueless as Donald Trump are running for president. The surprise and the shock is that in spite of clearly knowing nothing, I mean nothing, ladies and gentlemen, his supporters seem to have unwavering support for him. It is truly, truly disturbing. Okay, I need to talk to you about something very, very serious. I don't know if this is a story about how delusional or how dangerous the TP ticket is. That's, of course, Trump Pence, not toilet paper, Trump Pence. Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence said late last week that if Donald Trump is elected, Roe v. Wade, the landmark Supreme Court ruling that legalized abortion, would be overturned, saying, quote, I'm pro-life and I don't apologize for it. We'll see Roe v. Wade consigned to the ash heap of history where it belongs. Now, the point Pence is trying to make is important, and it's one of the reasons I've been saying Trump needs to be kept out of the White House at all costs. If Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned, it will be the result of a very, very conservative Supreme Court. Now, how would the Supreme Court get so conservative? Well, if Donald Trump becomes president and names Supreme Court justices from that extremist, lunatic, crazy list that was provided to him by right-wing think tanks. This is what Donald Trump would do. And Mike Pence is reminding us that elections have huge consequences in terms of the Supreme Court. Remember that in the 4 years expected to be governed over by the winner of this November's presidential election, there could be 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices nominated, okay? Now, to be clear, in reality, it would be tough even with a Supreme Court that is quite conservative to overturn Roe v. Wade in 4 years. Roe v. Wade was decided on due process grounds. You can't just come in and circumvent that by passing another law. Theoretically, you would have to pass a law, someone would sue, the courts would strike it down, and then when you got all the way up to the Supreme Court, they'd have to change their minds on the issue and flip about 50 years of case law, okay? But let's put that aside for a second because many of Trump's ideas are delusional and not based in reality. The fact that this is even being discussed as a worthy goal is disgusting. When I say that the Supreme Court is a hugely important consideration, our viewers sometimes say, well, I don't care about that. I want to do a protest vote or vote for a third party, or I might stay home. People write to me, they say, oh, Trump wouldn't be that crazy with the Supreme Court. He's just pandering, whatever. Can we really take that chance? If they are talking about overturning Roe v. Wade, which has been a part of American society since 1973, Everything is on the table, and dangerously so. I don't want to hear this garbage about, oh, David, you know that you're being alarmist. There's not going to be that big of a difference on the Supreme Court if it's Trump or Hillary. You know, they're the same on so many issues. No, they're actually quite different on many issues. This is a separate question from is Hillary as progressive as I want her to be? Obviously not. I mean, no, there's no doubt that the answer is no. But I guarantee you, Hillary is not going to pick lunatic conservatives suggested to her by the Heritage Foundation or the American Enterprise Institute. I'm sorry, it's so insane. I don't remember exactly who it was at this point. That is a practical and empirical and tangible difference. And if you're even talking about overturning Roe v. Wade as a result of the appointments you will make to the Supreme Court, then we are living in Looney Tunes Cocoa Puffville, and this is the danger that we all need to be aware of when we think about, well, maybe I'll stay home, or maybe I'll protest by writing in my cousin or something like that. No. This is hugely, hugely dangerous.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined today by Alex Filippenko, professor of astronomy at the University of California, Berkeley, and the only person to have participated on both teams that discovered the accelerating expansion of the universe in 1998. Let's start there. I think that this is a concept that even at its base level can be difficult for the average person to understand. How is the universe expanding and expanding at a faster and faster rate? What does that even mean? Is the universe contained within something? How is it measured? Give us a sort of layman's term introduction to the topic.
Wow, David, that's a lot of material. So we know that stars live in galaxies. For example, our own sun is in the Milky Way galaxy, which is a collection of more than 100 billion stars gravitationally bound together. And there are other galaxies out there, billions of them. And when we look at distant galaxies, we see that they're moving away from us. We can actually tell this because their light is shifted to longer wavelengths. It's redshifted, and this tells us that space is actually expanding between us and the other galaxies. So if you extrapolate this backward in time, you come to a time about 13.8 billion years ago when it all began in a very dense, compressed state, a point we call the Big Bang. And it's been expanding ever since. But the galaxies are pulling on one another, just as, say, the Earth pulls on an apple that's thrown up. And so the apple slows down because of the gravitational pull of the Earth. And so we would expect the expansion of the universe to be slowing down because of the mutual gravitational attraction between all the galaxies. Well, about 2 decades ago, 2 teams set out to measure the rate at which the universe is supposedly slowing down in its expansion, to see whether it'll someday stop and then collapse in a big crunch, or continue expanding forever, although progressively more slowly with time. That would be eternal expansion forever, but more slowly with time. And what we found surprised everyone. Instead of slowing down, the expansion of the universe has been speeding up, as though it's driven by some sort of a repulsive effect, which we call dark energy. So that was the big news in 1998, and we and others have been trying to figure out what is causing this acceleration ever since.
Okay, so many follow-up questions, and I'll pick one to start with.
Sure.
Conceptually, could this expansion be infinite? And I know infinity is sort of a concept in and of itself that is a whole other rabbit hole, for using a term that has no particular meaning in this conversation. But if it could be infinite, how is that possible? How could we even understand that?
Right. So, there are 2 possibilities for the universe. Either it's a finite volume universe, and there think of an expanding balloon where hypothetically, the universe is just the rubber, okay? And you can travel along the surface of the rubber, but you can't go inside or outside. So that would be the expansion of a finite, closed, two-dimensional space into a direction which is mathematically describable, but physically inaccessible to anyone on the balloon. Okay, so that's a finite universe expanding into some higher dimensional hyperspace, okay? But you could also have an infinite universe, and I think this is what you were talking about, and it's confusing. How can an infinite universe expand? Well, think of the number line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 0, -1, -2, -3. Suppose I were to take every 10th number, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, that goes on to infinity as well. But in a sense, it's less dense, right, than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Or I could take 100, 200, 300. That goes on infinitely far as well. But again, it's even less dense. So you can have the number line expanding, or if you take just specific numbers within the number line, there are fewer and fewer of them, but they still go on forever, if you know what I mean. So an infinite universe can expand. It just becomes less dense with time, just like this number example that I gave you. But it's not expanding into anything. It's just expanding. It's not becoming more infinite because it's already infinite, just like the number line is infinite. But it's becoming less dense. And these are difficult concepts around which to wrap your mind.
Yeah, you're telling me. So this gets me, the balloon example gets me to something that has sort of bewildered me as a kid, and I've never really even had a good way of sort of thinking about it. What's outside the universe? So talk to us about some of the thinking around, well, if we have something that is more in the style of the balloon that you're talking about, where is the balloon, so to speak?
Right. So, the balloon would be our 3 spatial dimensional space, X, Y, Z, and it's expanding through time, T, the 4th dimension, into a spatially distinct dimension. You could call it W or something. So it's sort of like the balloon, you can go forward and backward, left and right, or any combination of those two motions. Equivalently, if you use what's called polar coordinates, you're moving in theta and phi, 2 angles. But you can't yourself move into the radial direction, toward the center of the balloon, or out of the balloon into the bigger radial direction. You can mathematically describe that dimension, but you cannot yourself physically access it or point to it. But mathematically, it makes sense. It's just a higher dimensional hyperspace. So in our case, if we live in a 3 spatial dimensional universe wrapping around, quote unquote, a 4th spatial dimension, then we're expanding into that 4th spatial dimension. But I can't tell you where it is. I can't point to it. I can't grab it. I can't see it. It's mathematically describable, but physically inaccessible. And so you can think of it as just a higher dimensional hyperspace.
Okay, let's pause on that train of thought. Now that we've cleared that up and I have like a really good understanding of it, let me ask you, as a general, you're very, very good at, as people have seen so far, taking very complex concepts and sort of breaking them down into their fundamental parts to at least help us to start to understand them. When you, in whatever experience in the world you have, and this could be from media, from talking to students, whatever, what's one of the biggest misunderstandings or most common ones that you see the average person has about space or the universe or our world that you like to be able to clear up? What's something that you find is commonly coming up that people are sort of not understanding?
Right. Yeah. Well, certainly it's the idea of the center of the universe. We tell people that we see all the galaxies moving away from us. Does that then imply that we and the Milky Way galaxy are the center of the universe? And in fact, it doesn't, because imagine an expanding loaf of raisin bread. And the raisins are the galaxies. And by the way, they don't expand because they're held together by gravity quite strongly. But then you have the dough, which is filled with yeast, and you let it sit for an hour, and let's say it doubles in size. Well, if you put yourself on one raisin, you see all the others moving away. And so you say, whoa, I'm at the center of the universe. But then you call up your friends in some other raisin, and they say, well, we see everyone going away from us, and so we're the center of the universe. And then to break the tie, they call up a mutual friend on some other raisin, and they say, well, you guys are all wrong. We're at the center of the universe. But here you can see that because of the uniform expansion, no raisin, no galaxy can claim to be at the unique center of the universe, even though to each of them, it looks like they're at the center.
So Trump Tower on Wall Street is not the center of the universe. You can say unequivocally.
Right. Exactly. And, it's because of this uniform expansion that each of us thinks we're at the center, but there is no unique center, at least not in dimensions that we can physically probe. Now, going back to our balloon universe, that one does have a center. It's the center of the balloon, but that's not part of the universe as I've defined it. The universe in that case is the rubber balloon. Similarly, if we live in a three-dimensional space that wraps around a fourth dimension, then the center would be in that fourth dimension, but that's not part of our universe. That's in this higher dimensional hyperspace.
One thing I like to ask when I interview people working in astronomy and space exploration, et cetera, and I've had some interesting conversations with Lawrence Krauss about this, is your sense that we will ultimately come to some complete understanding of the origins of the universe that goes orders of magnitude beyond what we have now? Do you see that as a sort of point in the future?
I don't, actually. I think we'll get to a better understanding than we have now, just as over the past few centuries, by this amazing process of science, we've come to a better and better understanding of nature. And we come up with equations that have good explanatory power and predictive power. But I think in terms of a true, ultimate, complete understanding of the origin of the universe, I personally am skeptical. And it's because fundamentally, we can't, as far as I can tell, definitively test any hypothesis that we make, right? When you ask what happened before time equals zero or at time equals zero, you can come up with various possible answers to that question, but how do you test those different answers, those hypotheses, without creating new universes? And even if you do create new universes by some method, how do you know that's the only method and therefore was the one that created our universe? The uniqueness idea is something that can't really be tested, right? The uniqueness of an explanation. So I'm not saying that I don't enjoy physics. I clearly do, and I think people should continue pursuing these questions. But there may be some questions which are ultimately not answerable by the human mind, even with the most experiments and observations that we could possibly make.
Fascinating. We've been speaking with Alex Filippenko, professor of astronomy at the University of California, Berkeley. Thank you so much. Really fascinating.
Thank you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton both talk about jobs all the time, but they are not mentioning one of the most important issues that's going to affect jobs over the next 20 years. Who is going to create jobs? That they talk about. Who is going to bring back jobs? What about the unemployment rate? What about wages? How about hiring? Who's going to stimulate hiring? Small businesses, big businesses. We're going to lower tax rates. We're going to raise tax rates. How will that impact jobs? Neither one of these candidates is talking about the actual single biggest issue facing jobs over the next 20 years. You know, I've talked about it. I've been talking about it for years, more and more, but neither Donald Trump nor Hillary Clinton will talk about job automation and the rise of artificial intelligence. Job losses due to automation and robotics are often overlooked in discussions about the unexpected rise of outside political candidates, Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, as says Moshe Vardi, an expert on artificial intelligence at Rice University. Consider the reality that manufacturing jobs have been falling for more than 30 years, but manufacturing output is near an all-time high. Well, hold on a second. How is that happening? The output of manufacturing keeps growing, but the number of people employed in manufacturing keeps going down. Well, it's because of automation and artificial intelligence and robots, etc. Many of those jobs that people like Donald Trump and others did once send to China and Mexico just don't exist anymore. They're not there to be brought back. And I've talked to you about numerous reports over the last year or so, which suggests that somewhere between 35 and nearly 50% of current jobs are at risk of being automated away. Almost all of the transportation industry is at risk of almost disappearing. Almost every ground transportation, that is, almost every major car manufacturer is going to have almost autonomous vehicles in 3 years available. Mines in Canada are already switching to driverless ore trucks. There's a driverless truck corridor already being tested in the US. This is way, way bigger than the individual issues that these two candidates talk about. So why don't they discuss it? It's pretty simple, actually. It's just a lose-lose. If you're Hillary Clinton and you admit that tons of jobs are going away no matter who's president, it is now way more difficult to get any traction for your campaign by saying, oh, we're going to put in place this government subsidy to create jobs here or there, or we're going to make a tax reduction in this particular industry, or we're going to create some grants to stimulate hiring here or there. There is no advantage to either Trump or Clinton to saying, hey, you know what? No matter what he says, no matter what I say, no matter what she says, we are not going to be able to save or create as many jobs as we would like because computers and automation will be doing a lot of those jobs. The first person to say it gets slammed by the other. It's like a game theory where there is no advantage to actually bringing this up. And although it's a huge reality, it is an elephant in the room. It is a group of elephants in the room. Neither one of them is going to mention it because it's only going to hurt your campaign. And by the way, you know what can also affect jobs, which some Democrats are willing to talk about more, but again, it's not a prominent issue right now in this election. Multiple feet of sea level rise is going to really affect jobs. And of course, that connects to climate change. And we hear sometimes candidates will say, really just Democrats, climate change is a national security issue. Yeah, that's true. Not only is it a national security issue, it's a labor and employment issue. And neither one of these candidates is going to talk about it. And if you ask them about this, I would guarantee that they would pivot. Trump might not even have the skills to actually pivot. He might just expose himself as completely clueless, saying, no, I would keep making deals. There's not going to be any machine that replaces me to make deals. Hillary Clinton would probably transition again into subsidies or taxes or training or whatever the case may be. And this issue will not be addressed head on because there's no political advantage to doing it. Hey, this is something really funny. Republicans, a bunch of Republicans are really upset because Bradley Cooper, the actor, was at the Democratic National Convention. I'll explain. Sometimes Republicans are destroyed when their perceptions are shattered by details that I like to call facts. Bradley Cooper played Sniper Chris Kyle in the Hollywood movie about Sniper Chris Kyle. As we now know, the entire movie was based on sham after sham. We now know that many of the stories that Chris Kyle told were not true. We know that he even lied about medals of valor that he had earned, really a no-no among members of the military, et cetera, but still a sort of right-wing hero to many. And Bradley Cooper was also a right-wing hero to many for playing Chris Kyle in the movie. However, as you can see if you're looking at the picture over my shoulder today, Bradley Cooper was at the Democratic National Convention, and a whole bunch of conservatives were going absolutely nuts, saying, wait a second, Chris Kyle was not really played by a right-winger. Now, this isn't really new information. Political donations are open to the public. You can easily find that dating back to at least 2008, Bradley Cooper has been donating to Democrats, making a $750 donation to Hillary Clinton 8 years ago. Anyway, many conservatives very, very angry. Let's look at some tweets. First, here is a self-described constitutional conservative saying, I have a list of celebrities that support socialism I refuse to spend another dollar on. Add this one, boycott them all. Here's someone who describes themselves as an unapologetic, white, mostly conservative, patriot individual, as described by his own profile picture. Take a look at this. I believe we have it. Yeah, Bradley Cooper. How could you possibly play the hero Chris Kyle so well and then surround yourself with anti-Americans? Here's a woman who seems to be from Texas who tweeted out the following. I think we have it here. Bradley Cooper at DNC. Guess I've seen my last Bradley Cooper movie. Ew, ick. There were tons of these. And then the parodies started up. Dave Engler had a hilarious tweet that he put up on Twitter saying, people being mad at Bradley Cooper for having different political beliefs than a role he played is proof we need to invest in education. Yeah, I mean, after all, it's called acting for a reason, right? But I have to tell you, I actually sympathize with the feeling of some of these conservatives because I sometimes will really respect someone's work or their skill in some area. Then you find out they support Donald Trump or some lunatic Republican, and it really destroys my image of them. And I mean, as an example, and this is kind of an older one, I never thought Mel Gibson was a particularly great actor, but he was pretty good in Braveheart. He was good in Conspiracy Theory. When I found out that he's a completely unhinged anti-Semite, gets pulled over, asks the cop if he's Jewish, just statement after statement that's despicable, I stopped watching anything that Mel Gibson was in. My life has been fine ever since. And sort of the practical problem for Republicans is that when it comes to actors and artists, etc., there aren't going to be that many right-wingers by the sort of very nature of those fields. So it can be a little more problematic. I sometimes ask conservatives, do you feel isolated or in some way bad that just about every musical artist you like and every actor you like thinks that your political views are ridiculous and supports the other side? And a lot of them say, you know what, it's just par for the course. It's always been the case. So I just am able to separate their work or their music from their political beliefs. I guess that's great. It's just unfortunate because unless Ted Nugent starts acting, you're going to be limited to what? John Voight, Stacey Dash, Antonio Sabato Jr., Robert Duvall. Robert Duvall is actually a good actor, and it's kind of disappointing that he's a right-winger. There are others, but you know what I mean. It must be sort of a sad world being a conservative and saying, every single person I'm a fan of essentially is a right-winger, or you're relegated to having to pretend to like Ted Nugent's music, which I still don't believe that many people like. Let's go to your voicemails. The voicemail number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's an interesting voicemail I received.
Hey, Dave Pacman, just found your station, Free Speech TV. I didn't know you were on it late at night. Enjoyed my first viewing. I am a conservative, believe it or not, and I do enjoy different opinions about the real world that's going on.
Yeah.
How come you guys haven't delved into the depth of the email issues surrounding Hillary, especially with Bernie being gypped out of his election to or nomination? He would have had it if it hadn't been stacked against him so much.
Well, listen.
That's for sure when you actually get a chance to read some of the emails. I don't know if you've discussed it. I hope you have, and if you haven't, please do so. Thanks.
We've discussed it extensively, number one. Number two, it's great that conservatives like the show. We have conservatives, liberals, moderates who like the show. You mentioned Bernie was gypped. That is an offensive term, just so you know. Saying someone was gypped is effectively like saying someone was Jewed, and it refers to gypsies, also known as the Romani people. It's an offensive term, and I stay away from it. But to the extent that you like using the term, okay, well, that's your choice. But yes, we've delved into the DNC emails extensively. On the bonus show today, I will talk to you about spying that can be done via wireless keyboards. I will also talk to you about a bus company that I am very familiar with that is blocking a study on trains. And I have really good updates for everybody about the new website that is launching. If you're not aware of the entire refresh of the David Pakman Show website, you should really become a member because we've been talking to our members about what's going on. We are on the verge of a total paradigm shift with regard to our website. We will talk about it on the bonus show. davidpakman.com/membership. Sign up right away. Get instant access to the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.